Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with yours truly. You know I love going deep on personal development, so today we're going to be tackling emotional intelligence.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I think so too. And to help us out, we're diving deep into Brianna Wiest's 101 essays that will change the way you think.
Oh, yeah. I love that book. So much good stuff in there.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so emotional intelligence, it's kind of a buzzword these days, but what really struck me from Wiest's take is how it's not about just being happy all the time.
Yeah, that's a common misconception, right? Like, just slap on a smile and everything's fine.
Totally. But Wiest dives into how it's more about understanding and working with our emotions.
Exactly. She has this list of things that emotionally intelligent people don't do, which I thought was super insightful.
Ooh, yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, like, one of them is they don't assume that their feelings perfectly reflect reality.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It is, because so often we think, oh, I'm feeling this way, so it must be true. But that's not always the case, right?
No, not at all.
And Wiest actually talks about this thing called projection bias.
Projection bias. What's that?
It's basically when we project our own thoughts and feelings onto others, assuming they think and feel the same way we do.
Oh, I can see how that would cause some problems.
Definitely. Like, imagine you're in a bad mood and you see your friend across the street.
And you just assume they're ignoring you because you're feeling down.
Exactly. When in reality, they might not have even seen you, or they could be preoccupied with something else entirely.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great example. Okay, so what else is on this list of things emotionally intelligent people don't do?
Well, another one is they don't try to force happiness all the time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't be happy 24/7.
Right, and actually trying to force it can backfire. Wiest emphasizes how embracing the full spectrum of human emotions, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is actually healthier.
Totally. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Exactly. It's
Like
going to pop up eventually.
So it's more about acknowledging those feelings rather than trying to suppress them.
Right, exactly. And this next one really resonated with me. Emotionally intelligent people don't mistake a bad feeling for a bad life.
That's an important distinction. I know I've definitely fallen into that trap before.
Haven't we all? Like, you have a rough morning and suddenly your whole life feels like it's falling apart.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like spilling your coffee before a big meeting and thinking, ugh, this whole day is ruined.
But the truth is, it's just a spilled coffee, right? It doesn't have to define your entire day, let alone your whole life.
Yeah, that's so true. It's about perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Wiest calls this tendency to overgeneralize extrapolation bias. It's taking one event, often negative, and projecting it onto our entire future.
So basically catastrophizing.
Exactly. And it can really hold us back from experiencing joy and contentment in the present moment.
That's fascinating. So if we're connecting these ideas, becoming more emotionally intelligent starts with recognizing these little mental traps we fall into.
Absolutely. And then we can start to challenge them and choose a more helpful way of thinking and responding.
It's like becoming the CEO of our own minds.
I love that analogy. And that brings us back to projection bias for a second.
Oh, right. Tell me more about how that plays out in our daily lives.
Well, let's say you're nervous about a presentation at work, and you notice a coworker seems a bit distant.
And immediately you jump to the conclusion that they're judging you or thinking you're not good enough.
Right, when in reality, they might just be having a bad day themselves or be preoccupied with something completely unrelated to you.
Yeah, it's so easy to make it all about us.
And emotionally intelligent people recognize that everyone has their own stuff going on, their own internal world that we're not always privy to.
It's like that saying, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Beautifully put. Have you ever caught yourself falling into that trap, assuming your feelings are facts or letting a bad moment dictate your entire outlook?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's something we all do to some extent, but I'm definitely trying to be more mindful of it.
Me too. It's a constant work in progress, right? But awareness is the first step.
Definitely. And, Wiest also talks about how this whole process of personal growth can be pretty uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, growth often involves some growing pains, right?
Exactly. But Wiest actually points out some surprising feelings that could actually mean you're on the right track.
Okay, now this I gotta hear. Uncomfortable feelings that are good signs.
Yep. Like feeling like you're reliving childhood struggles, for example.
That sounds counterintuitive. How could that be a positive thing?
Well, Wiest sees it as a sign of becoming more conscious. When those old patterns and wounds resurface, it's an opportunity to finally face them and understand where they come from. I get it. So instead of running away from them, we can actually use those moments for healing and growth.
Exactly. It's like finally having the tools to rewrite those old, unhelpful scripts.
That's such a powerful image. And it's not just about childhood stuff, right? Wiest says another feeling that could actually mean you're growing is feeling lost or directionless.
Interesting. So like that quarter life crisis everyone talks about.
It could be. But instead of seeing it as a negative, Wiest suggests it could actually be a sign that you're becoming more present and letting go of old expectations that no longer serve you.
Like shedding an old skin almost.
Yes, and opening yourself up to new possibilities that you might not have even considered before.
That's so powerful. I know I felt lost before, and it can be scary, but it can also be incredibly liberating.
Definitely. And sometimes that process of shedding the old and embracing the new requires a bit of solitude.
Solitude. Oh, you mean like needing some time alone?
Yeah, exactly. And Wiest actually lists that as another good sign.
That's so interesting because our society often views being alone as like a bad thing.
I know, right? Like
Yeah.
you're a loner or something's wrong with you if you enjoy your own company.
Exactly. But Wiest describes this need for solitude as a necessary recalibration.
Recalibration, what do you mean by that?
It's like hitting the reset button. You're creating space to process your emotions, recharge your batteries, and connect more deeply with yourself.
So it's not about isolating yourself from the world. It's about intentionally creating space for introspection and self-discovery.
Exactly. It's like taking a break from the external noise so you can hear your own inner wisdom more clearly.
I love that. So those feelings of needing some space aren't something to be ashamed of. They're actually a sign of strength and self-awareness.
It's about honoring your own needs and giving yourself the space to grow and evolve.
I'm really struck by how these uncomfortable feelings can actually be guideposts on our journey of personal development.
Yeah, it's like they're little whispers from our soul, urging us to pay attention and move in a different direction.
Have you noticed any of these feelings in your own life?
Oh, definitely. And I used to resist them, but now I try to see them as opportunities for growth.
Me too. It's a whole new way of looking at things, isn't it? And speaking of looking at things in a new way, Wiest also dives into this concept she calls the knowing-doing gap.
Oh, the knowing-doing gap. Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Right. It's like we know it's good for us, but we don't always do it.
It's that classic struggle between our head and our heart, or maybe our head and our habits.
Exactly. Like knowing I should eat healthier, but still reaching for the cookies.
Ha! Yep, that's the knowing-doing gap in action. And Wiest stresses how recognizing this gap is crucial for taking control of our choices and actually making changes in our lives.
So how do we actually bridge that gap? Because it's one thing to acknowledge it, but it's another thing entirely to actually do something about it.
Well, Wiest poses some really powerful questions in the book that can help us get unstuck.
Oh, I love a good thought-provoking question. What are some of them?
Well, one of them is, if you had to live today on repeat, where would you end up?
Whoa, that's a heavy one. It really makes you think about the long-term consequences of our choices.
Right, like if we keep making the same choices day after day, where will that lead us? Is that where we really want to be?
Oof, I'm feeling a little convicted already.
Me too. And another one is, how many hours will you have wasted on things that don't truly matter?
That one hits hard. It's so easy to get caught up in distractions and busy work that ultimately don't contribute to our happiness or fulfillment.
Right. It's a reminder to be intentional with our time and energy.
I'm writing these down. What other questions does she ask?
Oh, there's another one that really resonated with me. What amazing opportunities might you miss because you weren't ready?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's a bit of a wake-up call, right? Because the truth is, we'll probably never feel 100% ready for anything.
So true. It's so easy to get stuck in that perfectionism trap, thinking we need to have it all figured out before we take a leap.
And while preparation is important, waiting for that elusive feeling of readiness could lead to a lot of missed opportunities.
And a lot of regret down the line. So how does this tie back to emotional intelligence?
Well, it's not just about understanding our emotions. It's about using that understanding to make choices that are aligned with our values and goals, even when it's hard.
So it's like recognizing when fear or procrastination are holding us back, and then choosing to take action anyway.
Exactly. And sometimes that action is just a small step, but it's a step in the right direction.
I appreciate that Wiest doesn't just talk about these concepts in a theoretical way. She actually gives practical questions and tools we can use in our own lives.
Totally. It's not about passively understanding your emotions. It's about actively using that understanding to create a life that feels truly fulfilling and authentic.
And speaking of understanding how our minds work.
And speaking of understanding how our minds work, Wiest dives into this really fascinating world of cognitive bias.
Oh yeah, cognitive biases. Those are like mental shortcuts our brains take.
Right, exactly. And they can be super helpful in some situations.
Right, like helping us make quick decisions when we don't have a lot of time to think.
Exactly. But the thing is, these biases can also lead us astray sometimes.
Oh, interesting. So they're like double-edged swords.
Exactly. And Wiestis emphasizes that understanding these biases is crucial for boosting our emotional intelligence.
I see that. Because if we're not aware of them, they can really distort our perception of reality.
Totally. It's like looking through a funhouse mirror. Things might appear bigger or smaller than they actually are.
I love that analogy. So what are some examples of these cognitive biases? We touched on projection bias and extrapolation bias before, but I'm curious to learn more.
Okay, so let's say you're trying to buy a used car.
Ooh, I love this kind of example.
And the seller starts by throwing out a ridiculously high price.
Okay, I've been there.
That initial price might actually anchor your perception of what the car's worth, even if it's way overpriced.
Oh, wow. So even if I try to haggle them down, I'm still starting from that inflated number.
Exactly. That's the power of anchoring bias. It's like that first piece of information sets a sort of baseline in our minds.
That's crazy. And I bet it happens in all sorts of situations, not just buying cars.
Totally. Think about those buy one, get one 50% off deals.
Ooh, yeah, I'm a sucker for those.
And then you end up buying two things when you only went in for one.
Because suddenly it feels like a steal, even if I didn't really need the second item.
Exactly. Anchoring bias in action.
Wow. Okay. So what other biases are out there?
Well, there's negativity bias, which I think we're all pretty familiar with.
Oh, yeah, negativity bias. Why is it that bad news always seems to stick with us more than good news?
Well, there's actually an evolutionary reason for that.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
So back in the caveman days, it was more important to notice a saber-toothed tiger lurking in the bushes.
And they're like a pretty butterfly.
Exactly. Our survival depended on being able to spot danger and react quickly.
That makes sense. So we're kind of hardwired to focus on the negative.
Right. But in today's world, where we're not constantly facing life or death situations, always focusing on the negative can lead to a lot of unnecessary stress and anxiety.
For sure. It's like that saying, one bad apple spoils the bunch. We let one negative experience overshadow all the good ones.
Exactly. And connecting this back to emotional intelligence, it's not about pretending that bad things don't exist. It's about recognizing that our brains might be blowing them out of proportion.
So we need to be mindful of that negativity bias and actively seek out positive information to balance things out.
Absolutely. And you know what can be a really powerful tool for that?
What's that? I'm intrigued.
Routine.
Routine. Really, I'll be honest. When I hear routine, I kind of think boring and repetitive.
Yeah, I get that. A lot of people associate routine with being stuck in a rut.
Exactly. But Wiest actually challenges that assumption.
She argues that routine can be incredibly liberating.
Liberating. Okay. I'm willing to hear you out. How is routine liberating?
Think about it this way. When you have a solid routine, you're not constantly making decisions.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's like having things on autopilot frees up mental space for other things.
Exactly. You're not scrambling around trying to figure out what to wear or what to eat or when to work out.
It's all pre-decided, so you can just flow through it.
Right. And that frees up mental energy to focus on things that really matter.
Like creative projects, relationships, personal growth, things like that.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting? Wiest highlights how highly successful people throughout history often had consistent habits that helped them thrive.
So it's not just for, like, type A personalities who like to have everything planned out.
Not at all. Think about artists or writers. They might not have a traditional 9-to-5 job.
But they often have a specific time and place where they do their creative work.
Exactly. It's about finding a structure that works for you and creates a sense of stability and grounding.
Okay, I'm starting to see how routine it could actually be a really powerful tool for boosting emotional intelligence.
It helps you manage your energy, reduce stress, and create space for those positive emotions and experiences we were talking about earlier.
It's like setting yourself up for success, both internally and externally.
Precisely. Now get ready for this next concept. Wiest explores something she calls a happiness upper limit.
A happiness upper limit. Okay, I'm officially curious. What is that?
It's like this invisible ceiling on how much happiness we allow ourselves to experience.
Wait, what? So you're saying we're actually sabotaging our own happiness?
In a way, yeah. We all have this internal thermostat set to a certain level of happiness, and when we start to feel too good,
We do things to bring ourselves back down. Why would we do that?
There are a few reasons, according to Wiest. One is the fear of exceeding a likability limit.
A likability limit. What's that?
It's like we worry that if we're too happy or successful, others will judge us.
Ooh, I see that. Like they'll think we're bragging or being inauthentic.
Exactly. It's like we're afraid to outshine others or make them feel bad.
It's almost like we're trying to stay small to avoid being seen.
Right. And another reason is this false belief that happiness means giving up on achieving more.
So if we're content with where we are, we'll lose our motivation to grow and strive.
That's the fear, yeah. But the truth is, we can be happy now and keep working towards our goals.
Totally. It's not an either situation.
And finally, Wiest says some people confuse apathy for safety.
Apathy for safety. How so?
They avoid feeling anything too deeply, good or bad, to protect themselves from getting hurt.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. It's like they're closing themselves off from experiencing life fully.
Exactly. And all of these things contribute to this unconscious upper limit we create for ourselves.
It's like we're putting ourselves in a happiness box.
And the crazy thing is, we're often the ones building the box and putting ourselves in it.
Wow, that's a powerful image. I'm definitely starting to see how this plays out in my own life.
The first step is awareness, right? Once we see it, we can start to challenge it.
And hopefully break free from those self-imposed limitations.
Exactly. And Wiest offers some really practical tips for doing just that. Like she talks about the idea of practicing feeling good.
Practicing feeling good. I like the sound of that. What does that look like in practice?
It's about actively cultivating positive emotions, even in small ways.
So like what? Give me some examples.
Maybe it's savoring that first cup of coffee in the morning, taking a walk in nature.
Ooh, or listening to your favorite music.
Yes, or taking a moment to appreciate the beauty around you, even if it's just a simple flower.
I love that. It's like training your brain to focus on the good stuff.
Exactly. Which, as we talked about earlier, can be a challenge with that negativity bias always trying to steal the show.
Right. So we have to be intentional about shifting our focus.
Absolutely. And the more you practice feeling good, the more you expand your capacity for happiness.
It's like stretching a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
That's a great analogy. And, before we wrap up this part, I have one more super intriguing concept from Wiest to share.
Ooh, lay it on me.
It's the idea of simply conceiving of who your best self is.
Conceiving of my best self.
I like that. It's like creating a vision for the person we want to become.
Exactly. And it doesn't require any special skills or resources. It's simply a matter of taking the time to reflect.
And really imagine who that best version of ourselves is.
Right. What qualities do you want to embody? What kind of impact do you want to make on the world?
It's like painting a mental picture of our ideal selves. And the amazing thing is, once you have that vision, even if it's still a work in progress, it can start to shape your choices and actions in the present.
It's like setting a destination on your GPS. You might not know the exact route yet.
But as long as you keep moving in that general direction, you'll eventually get there.
I love that. So it's not about having it all figured out. It's about setting an intention and taking steps towards that vision.
Exactly. And that brings us to the heart of what we've been talking about today.
The power of emotional intelligence to shape not just our inner world, but our outer reality as well.
It's not just some fluffy concept. It has real, tangible effects on our lives.
I'm so inspired by this conversation. I'm already feeling more empowered to make conscious choices that align with my values.
That's awesome. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right. There will be ups and downs, but the important thing is to keep learning and growing.
And to be kind to ourselves along the way. We're all works in progress, always evolving and becoming.
All right, we're back. And I gotta say, that whole best self vision thing we were talking about before the break, it really stuck with me.
I know, right? It's such a cool concept.
It is. And it feels so empowering, too. Like we actually have a say in who we become.
Exactly. And the best part is it's accessible to anyone. You don't need any fancy tools or resources to do it.
Just a little bit of imagination, right?
Exactly. It's all about taking that time to reflect and really envision the qualities you want to embody.
I'm curious, what does your best self vision look like?
That's a great question. For me, it's about being someone who is grounded and compassionate, but also courageous enough to actually pursue my passions, even when it's scary.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
What about you? What resonates most with you when you think about your best self?
I think for me, it's about being more present and mindful in everyday life. Like, it's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle and everything. But I really want to savor those little moments, and connect more deeply with the people around me. That's beautiful. And remember, it's not about achieving some perfect ideal. It's more about setting an intention, like a direction you want to move in.
Oh, yeah. Progress over perfection, right?
Exactly. And speaking of progress, I wanted to circle back to the knowing-doing gap for a second.
Oh, yeah. That tricky little gap.
Wiest actually offers a really helpful tip for bridging that gap, and she calls it chunking.
Chunking, like bite-sized pieces.
Kinda, yeah. It's basically about breaking down those big, overwhelming goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
So instead of like, I'm going to write a novel, it's more like, I'm going to write for 30 minutes every day.
Exactly. And by focusing on those smaller steps, you kind of create momentum and build confidence along the way, too.
Makes the whole thing less intimidating, for sure.
Right. And I think that's a really helpful strategy, especially for those goals that feel kind of daunting or out of reach at first.
Yeah, I love that. It's like climbing a mountain. Just focus on one step at a time. You know, this whole deep dive has been a mountain of insights, really. So much to unpack and explore.
It really has. And I'm excited for everyone listening to start applying some of these ideas to their own lives, too.
Yes, it's all about taking action, right? So for anyone listening who is feeling inspired, what's like one small step they can take today to boost their emotional intelligence?
Ooh, good question. You know, I think a great starting point is to simply set aside some time for reflection. Just like 5 or 10 minutes to check in with yourself, notice how you're feeling, and maybe even start envisioning that best self we were talking about.
I love that. Just a few minutes each day can make a world of difference, right?
Absolutely. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be times when you stumble, you might fall back into old patterns.
It happens. It's all part of the process.
Exactly. The key is to be kind to yourself, learn from those experiences, and just keep moving forward.
Self-compassion is key for sure. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. This deep dive has been so insightful and inspiring. I'm feeling really motivated to continue exploring these concepts and keep growing my own emotional intelligence.
Me too. It's been a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And for everyone listening, remember you have the power to create a life you love, a life that is aligned with your truest, most emotionally intelligent self. So keep learning, keep growing, and as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.